I'm your host, Q, coming from South Puget Sound Community College, Assistant Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or I should say the A. Barbara Clarkson Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Center. Put respect on that. Otherwise, we know Ms. Barbara Clarkson will find me. So, nothing but love for her. So, but today's conversation is really going to be talking today about, your skin folk ain't always your kinfolk. And what that means is, the fact of the matter is Black folks, people of color, having to not only deal with just the racism, the emotional labor and all those things, and regarding to white folks, we also have to deal with it within our own community. We also have to deal with it even in the spaces of higher education. And I think that is really important to have the conversation so we can really make this a nuanced approach to hopefully finding some healing and hopefully finding some more spaces where it's talked about more so it can actually be dealt with more. According to my grandmother, it's better to deal with your own shit in your own home than trying to give it out there to other folks. So just saying. So you already know, and I know both of you very personally and amazingly, just all the work that you do. But I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic over to Anthony PV. Let the people know who you are, your name, what you do.
Okay, so yeah, my name's Anthony. I am currently a third-year Ph.D. student at the University of New Mexico. Let's see, I got my master's degree at Minnesota State University in Mankato. Now I'm here studying mixed, I focus my research on mixed race identity, mixed race people in media, Blackness, race, and sports specifically. So those are my areas of interest.
Awesome. Well, thank you, PV. I always call him PV, so just letting y'all know that. That's always gonna be the thing. It's funny because my OA was like, he was like, Anthony confirmed. Who the hell is Anthony? And he was like, what are you talking about, PV? And so, and I was like, oh, you mean it's a whole government name? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's him. That's him.
I hear that.
Just saying. But I'm gonna pass the mic to just for the folks that don't know, my brother Charlie Insminger, my first supervisor here at South Puget Sound Community College, who just laid the foundation and groundwork for me to be successful here and just moving forward in what I do. I'm gonna pass the mic over to the legendary, amazing, soon to be Dr. Insminger.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So my name is Charlie. I guess my government name would be Charles, but my name is Charlie. I go by that last name Insminger, and I am privileged ultimately to be the director of student development down here in Orlando, Florida, at Valencia College in the Eastern region. It's pretty amazing, getting an opportunity to work with such incredible Black and brown folks. I ain't gonna lie to you. I mean, we at HBCU, but we've been holding it down pretty hard. And I appreciate that introduction. I do. As far as my background is concerned, I would say I'm a human, right? I'm more of a grassroots intellectual than anything else. Found my way into education one day, mistakenly, I think, at the end of the day, because I don't necessarily think it was meant for me. But I did find my way. And ultimately found my way into positions where I could continue to give back to folks who look like me, sound like me, walk like me, talk like me, cry like me, and feel like me. I am completing my education as an industrial organizational psychologist, so that's what my PhD is in. Ultimately, my focus is a lot on systems and people and personalities. I'm the guy who walks in the room and talks to you about synergy, but I'm secretly overanalyzing everything that happens, something that I learned just being this skin color, walking through life, right? Like education was easy because they were like, oh, y'all paying attention to systems? I've been doing this forever because this is how we stay out of jail. And so, but definitely blessed to have, graced your presence. Q is, you're my brother, you're my family. And I'm excited to meet you, PV, because anybody that I think can find their way into Q's circle, could definitely find their way into mine. Not many folks you meet, when you meet them right away, you like, wait, we family. Like, this is weird. Like, why didn't I see you at the barbecue? When was the last time you was at church? Right? Like, it was definitely a great experience and has continued to be ever since. So it's exciting just to be a part of this conversation today, especially talking about such a great topic about your kinfolk. Man, I remember my big mama saying that, like, oh boy, all them kinfolk, and that's your kinfolk. It's just crazy because she's come out of church at that time, so I don't know if there's some similarities. Talking about Miss Gloria down there. I see you at church.
No, I have nothing but just much respect for the both of you. And I just, I've seen just, for me, I'm a very protective person. PV knows that. Charlie knows that. I was very protective of PV when he was in grad school, and his experiences, as we might talk or may not talk about, but he knows what I mean. And, if anything, I'm always protective of my people. That means my Black folks, but, also people of color too. And I think for me, the one thing that's always the most irritating for me is when your own go against you, your own don't support you, your own's not really there, it's not authentic, or other people of color are very either anti-Black and such, right? And so I don't think we talk about that. Like, we can talk about anti-racism, but are you anti-Black? Like we need to have the really bigger conversation. And so the first question that I really want to talk about is, when did you know, or when was your first experience when you realized when your own folks weren't for you? When was your first experience? Because I can remember mine. And anyone of you can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this would have been, back when I was in college, in undergrad, I was a part of speech and debate. So I did collegiate forensics, learned a lot, and then had to unlearn a lot to write academically, but that's a different story. They have an activity, or at the end of like our national tournament, that's a picture of all the Black competitors. And I'm trying to get in that picture, and I was told by somebody in that group that I wasn't Black. And so that was my first experience. Major experience, I guess, that impacted me that sort of way, where I was like, this has never happened to me before. So that hurt me, and that stuck with me. Obviously, I'm not going to name names, but that was the first time I realized that some people have like unique ways of trying to define Blackness. For me specifically, it has to do with the fact that I'm light skinned. Someone isn't willing to accept the fact that I want to be in the Black picture because I am Black. So that was the first time for me that really stands out.
So that person that you were referring to was a Black person?
Yes.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I'm a petty specialist, so I'm always okay throwing names out, but I want you to feel comfortable when you're ready. I appreciate that. I want to come back to that, but Charlie, when was your first experience on that?
Man, so the desire not to be vulnerable would be like never, right? Like, what you talking about? I've always been Black. I don't understand what you're saying. But obviously that wouldn't be true. So I would say my first experience that I can remember, one that left the biggest stain on me, was actually being a Black mixed race male. Like I live on both. At times you live in the center of two competing worlds, two very paradoxical competing folks, and who use situations to their advantage. So the first time I felt that was actually from a family member, which I have later reflected on and knew that it hurt a little bit more, I guess. But for me, it was my father's very dark skin, and most of the males in my family are very dark skinned. So coming out light skinned and ultimately being born at the end of the 70s and, you know, coming into the 80s, Chico the Barge was a thing. And they used to call my uncle Blue Black, right? And his nickname was Blue at times. And so in a fit of rage one day, he definitely made it a point to let me know that that I wasn't one of the blackest folks in the picture, and ultimately labeled me as the white boy because of my white mother, which hurt, right? Because at the time I was like, what do you mean? This is where I lay my head, right? Like your mama is my big mama. I don't understand what you mean that we different. Your brother is my father, right? Like we break bread at the same tables. But that was the first time I think it was really ever, like it made a stain on me at a young age. Like, wait a second, saying we ain't the same. I just thought maybe I was a little paler. Because that was my first little introduction to racism. It wasn't my last, obviously, because I've been around for a little while, like many of y'all, but my first.
Thank you both for sharing that. Now I'm gonna actually flip this a little bit because I know, you know, both of you being mixed race, biracial folks, is that it's interesting because my first experience was from someone who identified as biracial. And so, you know, for me, in undergrad, I went to Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, and my first experience of really realizing that someone who was of mixed race really didn't see my blackness, my potential, my hunger as someone who grew up in the hood and was very street smart. And then on top of that, I had to learn how to become book smart. And so I was very excited. I was very eager. I mean, for folks out there, you know, like, I mean, I grew up watching A Different World, and that was my experience of like, oh, this is what college is. This is, you know, I could find community. And I remember having my first Black professor who was biracial. She was a biracial Black white woman. PV probably know who it is, Dr. Rachel Griffin. Was my first Black instructor. And I remember my experience wanting to be mentored, wanting to really learn, right, of like how to go through college. And my experience with her wasn't really pleasant. And I remember during undergrad, I was dating a white dude who I still got love for. He knows that. But she would talk to him and stop to talk to him and engage with him and not me. And it would happen all the time. And even he was like, what the fuck is going on? Like when we're together, if me and him are like grocery shopping and things, and I'm like, do I represent something to you? What it was not the best experience. And so although I respect her, I still do, as a Black woman, as a Black and white biracial woman who's doing amazing work in higher education and her scholarship, right? Like I respect that, right? But I think when I talk about as a Black person, you know, my assumption and my eagerness, I just didn't get it. I didn't get that community that I thought I was. I mean, you're the only Black person in the Department of Communication. The only one. And that comes with a lot of pressure, and I can understand that. But then on the other side, I'm like, well, damn, if I can't really get it from where I thought I could, then where the hell do I get it from, right? And so I had to learn how to navigate that space, you know, and that was the first time I realized, like, well, fuck, I got to deal with white people, and now I also got to look out for my own people. And then I'm in higher education. So that was my first experience. Now, for me though, I'm really interested to know from your experience of when did you really come into your Blackness by being mixed race? Like when did you really tap into that and own it?
So before I answer that, I want to can we unpack for that what you just said for a second?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have some questions.
yeah.
Right. So here you are, young, go getting, right, Black undergrad student. You're a graduate, undergrad at the time.
I was an undergrad.
You were an undergrad. Okay. So how old do you think that professor was?
She actually was in her, I think she was in her late 20s, 30s.
Okay. And what was the average age of the other? Look, in her circle, how many folks do you think? Like, what was the age, just roughly? I mean, I know that's a while back, but if you could
Oh, like
guess.
faculty?
Yeah.
Like the age? Wow. Yeah. I mean, we're probably talking about ranged. I mean, if
Would you
I
say she
probably,
was a young faculty member though?
I think she was I think she was pretty. I think she was in her younger years. Yeah, like her
Younger than her peers, maybe.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Or at least younger than majority of them. Yeah.
So I mean, the only reason I asked that is so I find it very interesting when you're telling that, right? I'm trying to put myself where you're at right there, but I'm trying not to necessarily put myself in your shoes because then I'm going to get angry, right? Like I want to be like, wait a minute, what you mean? You're going to stop and talk to somebody else, but you ain't going to stop and talk to me? Like somebody that you have some kindred, kind of connection to. So I try to look at that from a perspective. Okay, so she didn't want to be the nail, right? Not saying that that's an excuse for any of that, but it's fascinating because even when you introduced the topic and said, hey, let's talk about this, I thought like, man, what does that really mean? Like my skin folk and my kinfolk, and then you start talking about colorism, right? Because that kind of just leads me next to that conversation. I feel like a lot of times in the Black community, folks look at light-skinned folks and they think like, oh, because it seems like you are perceptually closer to whiteness, right? Like we might be rightness, right? Ooh, I think I'm sounding a little bit like Cornel West. I apologize. Money into a bucket for that one, but truthfully, right? Like I think that there's that perception, and I know it dates back to things like the letters of Willie Lynch when Willie was saying, "Oh, we'll keep them in shackles," by basically making them hate themselves, right? And so I think that's what kind of resonates with me when I hear that story, right? I understand your position, just like I think a lot of us, and folks who are probably listening to this podcast, or listening and watching this right now, understand. Like what it's like to be by yourself in a position, and what it's like to look up and look across the room and say, I need someone, just one flotation device. I already know I don't belong here as it relates to y'all. Like I already know that I'm the oddity and potentially I'm already being tokenized, and I didn't even know that I was being tokenized because all of a sudden I'm the only Black voice. And tell me, Quinn, how all Black people feel about this particular topic, right? But I already know that I'm in that disposition, especially being a Black person in higher education today and yesterday and potentially tomorrow because we can't seem to get it right. And I'm not talking about we as Black folks, I'm talking about we as higher education. But I look at that scenario and then I think in that moment, like you would hope that a faculty member, especially of mixed race descent, can look down and say, like, I remember I had these experiences with folks who like this, just look like this person sitting in front of me, and let me grab a hold of you and let you know that you are not alone, right? I'm going to stop and say hi. I'm going to give you the greeting of the day. We're going to have a conversation. I'm going to give you mentorship, even if you ain't asking for it, because I remember what it was like to be a person in a situation where I didn't belong, unless you didn't. Unless the imposter syndrome that lived in you was the one that's with the mask that you wore every day, because I'm already the youngest person in the division, right? So, and why would I want to stick out? And so when you said that, it almost took me to that place where it's like, wait, sometimes we are the hardest against us, these imposters, these agents, right? In academia, in the machine, who look at us and you look across and you're just saying, I just need a friend today, like somebody to acknowledge me and to acknowledge the fact that we come from a different path, and not to make me special, because I'm not asking that. Didn't ask that to get here, not asking that to get through your class, not asking that to walk across the stage, not asking that to get into a job so you can screw your affirmative action on that end too. But just today, this moment, like just to know that we can share a moment similar to when I first saw you walk into SPSCC. Actually, no, that's a lie. Similar to when I saw you on a video in SPSCC when you were getting ready to come in, because I got to see your interview from the back end, right? And I said, wait a second, there's somebody who I can connect with. right? And when I hear you say that in relation to that story, I'm drawn to know, well, why did they do what they did to have that leave such a stain on you today?
Well, to answer that, it's a good place to go. It's actually the more because I can separate the scholar from the personal, right? I can do that. Like I can do that. And I think once I began to take more, of her classes and really kind of hear a little bit more of her story, I was like, makes sense. But that was my first experience because I came in as a non-traditional student thinking when I grow up watching Black television, like A Different World, that's going to be my fucking experience with my people. And that was not the case. And so I think for me, I was like,
you the end scene.
Done. And I think for me, it allowed me to realize like, okay, one, I grew up in the projects and public house, all the things, like black people is what I knew, and
it was your tribe.
It was my tribe, it was my people, it didn't matter because I grew up where my cousins are, we had biracial, Black and white, mixed race.
As most Black families do, let's be real with that.
Yeah. So I was like, for me, it just didn't dawn. And I was like, okay. One, there was an assumption, and I think as I gotten to know a little bit more, I started to realize, and the reasoning behind it a little bit. But I just never could understand it. And I'm like, well, maybe she didn't grow up around Black people. Maybe that wasn't her experience. And I think the little bits and pieces that she was comfortable sharing, it started to allow me to be like, oh, okay, now it's starting to click. And it wasn't that I was trying to like, drain or take up time. It was just that I wanted to connect and I wanted to find a safe place, right? To be my authentic self. And I just realized going through the communications program that I literally had to look for support outside of my own department, right? And how to connect with other people that actually saw me, and later I didn't really think that there was any respect there. It wasn't until I got to Minnesota State University where I was told from a roommate that she had told me to say that it got back to me that she said, tell Quentin I said hello. And I was like, you've never ever said hello to me, but you see me move forward in education from an academic level, and then you say hello, but you could totally email me. So for me, it was like, I don't know what that means. And maybe, and it's a lot of context. I don't want to spin a whole lot, but it just allowed me to realize, like, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to connect with this person the way that I want to, or maybe this person is not able to give me what I need, and that's okay. And I had to, but at the time I was young and I didn't really know a lot of what I know now. But now that I know, even me and my ex still, we talk about every once in a blue moon, but I'm like, he's like, yeah, that's just crazy. You know what I mean? That she was so much more willing to put more time into him in his academic journey as a white gay person, but really wasn't able to spend time and really try to give me what I was hoping for as a student from an actual professor. And I was like, well, damn. I said, well, welcome to college, bitch. So
my chopped liver. Welcome to college.
And so that was my.
Yeah, I had to do this myself.
And I know PV looking like, well, hot damn, I didn't know about this. So yeah, PV, so you'll know a little bit more. But yeah, that was my experience. And so, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And there's a whole other aspect to that coin, because we could kind of walk down the inverse of that and say, well, did she put you out there because she felt like you had to float by yourself and didn't want there to be
right.
When did you get in my class because, we Black and we together and we down like that. And so there could have been an opportunity for that tough love. But often, and maybe this is just the parent in me, when I hear tough love, when I try to rip it down to its gooey center, I find out that tough love is semi-abusive.
Yes.
Right. And often puts people in a very precarious situation.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because all the tough love in the world maybe doesn't make up for a simple hug and an acknowledgement, right?
Yeah.
Just something simple, just something simple. Yeah. Thank you for that. Sorry, I get off track.
No, this is a podcast of conversation, so it's supposed to happen. Yeah, but I guess for me though, you know, I guess my question to the both of you though is like, when did you really tap into your blackness and that you owned it, right? Because we understand that, we talk about the fact that, blackness can be a performative thing, and it's a spectrum, right? You can talk about blackness and just how we show up. Um, and for the both of you, and I'll go last when I talk a little bit about when I really tapped into my blackness, but I also think about, are we ever able to really tap into our blackness like fully? Because of the world we live in. But that's a little later part. But I'm really interested to looking at, when did you really tap into, or really wanted to explore what that looked like for you in the skin you're in?
Yeah. So you're full of good questions, Q. Great question. Yeah, so for me, I grew up in a small town in Iowa as one of maybe 2 or 3 Black kids at my high school, let alone students of color at my school. So I grew up very, very around all white people, right? My mother and my father had been divorced my entire life, so I was raised by my mom and my stepdad, who I called dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was raised in a white family. I was raised in a white community. And growing up, I didn't really spend too much time with my father's side of the family. I would see my father, but his side of the family, I didn't really spend too much time with them growing up. So I was never really, I guess, exposed to blackness, to Black culture growing up. It wasn't something that really I had much experience with. And then going into college, you bring everything with you into undergrad, right? So to me, I didn't know, I guess I didn't know exactly who I was. I had to try and find myself, and going through college, I had some solid Black mentors, some people that come to mind. I had some of my big brothers in college, Yao and Don and Darad, were very good mentors for me going through undergrad. But I feel like when I first really found myself was starting in master school when I went to Mankato.
I agree.
With you, Q, and my brother and sister, Marcus and Valencia. That was the first real experience, positive experience that I had with other Black people being super, super close to me and super, super inclusive of me and accepting of the fact that, I was one of them. And like I said, the people that I was in undergrad with, Durad, Don, Yao, that they were the same way, but I feel like starting to, and I think a lot of it comes with, advancing in education too. It's helped me a lot in understanding my own identity, understanding my mixedness, my Blackness, how they coincide, right?
Yeah.
So getting into higher education, having you, Q, were just like immediate. Like it was like day one, we're going to get together, we're going to talk to each other, and we're going to build a family here. And that was huge for me, and something that I really hadn't experienced before, because it was like, for the first time, I had somebody actually reach out to me and like express to me that, like, hey, I think I have an idea of some things that you've been through. So let's get you together with some people and make a community. So I think that coming to Mankato was the first time, and I honestly owe a lot to you for that.
Oh, I, Man, look, that's just me. I mean, and a lot of people don't know though. Like so I'm gonna back up. So basically, I left Illinois State University. Um, I just had a horrible experience because I got accepted to two. I got accepted to Illinois State and I also got accepted to Mankato. And I ended up leaving Illinois State University because I had the worst experience when it came to white faculty there. Either I was the queer person that needed to speak for all gay people, and then I also, or I was the Black person that was just experiencing so many microaggressions, right? So, and I'm sure they may have evolved, right, since then. But I left. I didn't do academically well. It was very traditional ways of how they do things, how they thought about things back then. And so I didn't do academic, I just didn't. And so I was like, what, fuck this. I need to really reevaluate myself and see where I need to go. And so I did end up, I was like, I just need to start over. And so I ended up going to Minnesota. And so one of the things, though, that I realized is that the Black people that was at Illinois State University in my cohort when I was in assistantship, we made it our business to connect. It wasn't even a thought. It was like we're around all of these other, particularly white folks that are in our grad program, and we made it our business that we need to make sure we have a space for us. And so I didn't have the experience they had. They had a really good experience in the program, and that's good, and I'm happy they did. And I didn't. So when I went to Mankato, I made it my business to go in with a different mindset to say, you know what, bitch, you need to focus on you and you'll actually focus on you and get really learn from that experience. And I learned from that experience. But then when y'all came in, the three of y'all came in, I was like, I don't even think you know how fucking happy I was to be able to see Black people. Now, here's the thing, and I'm gonna be clear about it on this show. I'm all down for the POC, but when I see Black people, I get fucking excited. So when I saw you, Valencia and Marcus, I was so happy because I felt like I was not alone. And I knew as a second year, I needed to have a huge conversation with y'all. One, what the fuck y'all was going to experience in graduate school. Two, it was my duty to protect you as a second year. And just as being old as fuck, but that's just a different story. But also just making sure I give you what I know to be true. And I hope I'm happy to hear that it helped you. I just did what I knew how to. And I just knew my experience from, like I shared earlier, right, to undergrad, like, I don't want to be that fucking person. And I will never let my people down at all. Even if I got to dress you down behind closed doors, I will never let you down. And so I'm happy to hear that. I appreciate it, but I'm just proud of you for, one, reaching out and connecting. So I just want to say that to you, my brother. Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Of course. Charlie, what you got for the people?
When did I know I was Black? Yesterday, no.
Okay.
I'm Black. Wait a second. No. So I'm listening to y'all and I'm thinking about my response. And I think, so I'm gonna make it complicated because that's what I do.
That's you though.
That's me. That's me and my genuine authentic self, right? So I gotta be complicated. So I think that's kind of two things, right? So when did I know myself I was Black? So I grew up in a musical household. And I say that, I don't even know if that's realistic, right? I don't know what that means anymore. But my father is a musician. And I grew up around it. And I grew up around ultimately just Black music, right? And for me, music is one of the few things that connects to my soul, like truly, like right out the gate. So I can hear a good song and I will feel full. Like I could be riding, you'll be in the car and just something come on and you be like, yes. My kids be mad because I'll be like, rewind. We'll play that again one more time for the people. Don't say nothing. And so I grew up a lot around a lot of Black music. And it wasn't just Black music, like I think like a lot of young folks today understand Black music, but Black music that was uplifting, Black music that talked to the community, right? Black music that was just as essential as the Negro spirituals we was humming in the fields, right? Black music that motivated you, that got you together, Black music that made you feel proud to be Black, right? Like James Brown said, I'm Black and I'm proud. Now I knew that, I felt that, right? Even if my uncle want to say what he want to say, that's fine. I felt that. But, and so when you ask that question, when did I know I was Black? I thought, well, maybe when was the first time I had some like positive affirmation that other people saw me as Black?
Ah,
and not saying that defines when I feel like I am, like, because that's always been in there, right? Like I feel that. Like when you look across the room, you can see somebody with color. Like that's like I genuinely get excited. Like when I came back to Florida, I was like, you can ask my wife. I was stupid. We were walking. I was like, look at all of this color.
yeah.
Look at how beautiful this is. We was walking in a place that looked like Chocolate City. Like, look at this. I'm home, right? So I've always felt that way, but I've not always been seen that way. The irony of that is, so I grew up in Black communities. I went to a Black high school. My first, I would say, try at college was at an HBCU. So it's been around me, right? But I've always battled with that. I think as I've gotten older, I continue to understand that a little bit more. And I would say that I come in touch with my Blackness and discover who I am as a Black man every single day. Every single day, every single day. Sometimes it's just my wife looking at me, acting crazy, like, I can tell you become an old Black man today. Like, when I'm yelling at people, just if you don't get the hell out my yard, you don't pay no mortgage around here, right? Yelling at my kids to turn off shit. But I don't necessarily see it as Black. I just think it's, just irony at times. But I think, I've always had a sense of my Blackness. I was really blessed to have a good relationship with my big mama before I left up north. So I was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My big mama is a matriarch. She's the center of our family. Her name is Dear Bush. She's just amazing. Like, I mean, if I close my eyes, I could smell her perfume right now. Like, that's my folks. And I knew I was Black because I came from her as well, right? She made it a point to let me know that. She always used to tell me, you high yellow, but you Black. I knew that, right? Like I knew that, but I knew that other people didn't. When I moved to Florida, there was more folks that looked, that was Latino, and ultimately, befriended me because they was like, hey, mira, and I was like, yo, I don't know what you're saying, but they saw me as that, right? They saw me as Black. They understood once I opened my mouth. Right? But at times my community did not. It was hard to embrace, right? Because there was again that colorism, that that assumption that life was better for me because I was a couple shades lighter than them. But again, I mean, as far as when I knew I was Black, that was young. Just because I love my folks, like I genuinely love Black people, like I don't care. It really doesn't matter, right? Like, because I understand the systems that we come from.
Yeah.
So I genuinely love our folks, and it's because it's it's us. But again, I think society's understanding of who I was, that's a whole different story. And even today, who I am often, right? Like I'm brought into situations and people are like, how's it like being a Puerto Rican guy? And I was like, I don't know. You should ultimately find one and ask them that because I have no idea. I think that's a different reckoning, different awakening, maybe.
Yeah, you know what? My experience was a lot different. Like I felt like my queerness came before my Blackness. And I'll tell you why, which is pretty much clear on the fact that we know Black folks ain't always too happy. Or when, when you are LGBTQ or a part of the community. And that was one of the things that I talked about. I did thankfully, and such an honor to do a presentation at Green River College here in Washington on living in the in-between of what it means to be Black and queer, right? And how we always have to live in the in-between. So I didn't really become very comfortable, and I know this is gonna sound crazy, I didn't really come into my Blackness until my mentor, who I love so much, and brother, Dr. Derek Williams, as a Black straight man, embracing me with love. I never had that. And as soon as I realized that that was actually something out there for me, is when I honestly tapped into my Blackness. And that wasn't until like the later years of my undergrad. Like I was like a junior or senior. So, and I was getting ready to, of course, to go off to grad school or wherever else it was meant for me to go. So I was always very comfortable and clear about my queerness. I was very, very, very clear about that. But my Blackness didn't come in until I needed love, validation, and all of those things to know that I didn't have to choose between the two. And once I realized that there were Black folks out there that was like, yeah, like, I don't care, like, you still family, and I'm gonna protect you, and that's just what it's gonna be. And I was like, oh, so it is Black people out there that really will accept all of me and my authenticity. And so that's when my Blackness started to really kick in. And so for me, I mean, to be honest, it didn't kick into me until late undergrad years. And I was very clear about who I was by the time I went to grad school, because I took that time beforehand to really work on me. And that's when, I realized that, and then all of my other frustration with the talking about white gay men, because they was getting on my nerves at the time. But other than that, that was where the time of me looking into myself during that. And so I just, so mine was a little different. Mine was a little different. It was a little different. I'm like, I don't think my Blackness is really accepted because I'm queer, and my people don't see me as being Black because they won't accept all of me. So I don't know. It was different. So, but yeah.
I think you speak to a point of and PV, I don't want to speak for you. I would just say, as another mixed race individual, I think that there is, in your own family, there's always going to be that intersectionality, and it's crazy, this embrace of identities, right? Like folks around you get to pick and choose the one that they want to embrace and the one that they want to point a finger at. And so it's interesting to hear you say that, right? Because as a mixed race Black man, I look at that and I say, well, I became comfortable being Black ultimately because I had to be, right? Like I was almost like, you got to pick a door, go to that one, right? Like that seems like the right door to go to. But for you, it was a different conversation, right? Like similar, but definitely different. I hear you, man. I hear you.
Yeah, PV, did you have anything you want to add? I know you over there processing, thinking, and I know you wanted to chime in a few things, because I know PV is a person who has questions, and he's good at those questions too.
Some questions.
Yeah, so this is an open dialogue conversation. PV, if you want to throw a question out there or anything like that, because this is family, feel free to do so. But yeah,
I don't have any questions right now. I mean, I like what y'all are saying. Hearing hearing your experience, as a queer Black individual, and just how for some reason those two identities can't go together is it's sad to hear those experiences. I've now that, of course, that I'm in PhD school and I have to read all freaking time, I'm reading a lot about how that is an issue, and now hearing it like, this is really an issue. And it's amazing to me how people try to, delimit what's allowed within Blackness, how can people perform Blackness, right? And it's just, I'm sorry to hear about your experiences, but you know, it's eye-opening to hear it, you know, like from somebody you care about. So yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question for PV. So when I read your bio, it said that you were part of your studies was in race and media. Am I correct with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm fascinated by this because I think that seriously. So when I started, I was like, man, I want to talk to people by himself, man. So I'm fascinated by this because I feel like, and I'm just a people watcher and ultimately maybe just a world watcher, I think. But we talk a lot about like how we feel in relation to how we have grown up and things of that nature. And you talked about, a different world. And I was like, man, that's funny because I grew up in the house of the Cosbys, right? So that was like, for me, it was what, people aspire to be in a traditional Black family tradition, right? Upper middle class Black family. We wasn't living in, but that would be living in it. It wasn't the Jeffersons because everybody had a crazy uncle that was like the Jeffersons. But the Cosbys was definitely a thing. And where I'm going with this is like, so in your studies, how have you seen that influence? Because I think that like media now like shapes the way people see the world, right? Like, and so when you see race in it, and we see it nowadays, right? So media is catering to certain things, but before Black folks, like I think about oh my goodness, Grace Jones.
Yeah.
Right. So here's a strong Black woman in Hollywood, but couldn't get a role really to save her life initially, but only as a tribal crazy lady with a spear, right? Or even the, as soon as like the first mom from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. What was that all about when Will Smith identified her as an angry Black woman and then they replaced her real quick, like.
Yep.
And so I'm curious with you in what you've seen. Like, how have you seen, I mean, is there anything that you're comfortable talking about as far as like how you've seen that shape and mold conversations like that? Because I think that colorism now is almost predicated on things like this.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, I'm new in the academic field, but
you're good. You probably read more than I have.
Yeah, no, but that's a good question, and to me, what I'm learning, what I'm observing is, like what, in regards to media, what are these representations of Blackness, right? Is it homogenous in nature, right? Are we, are we basing the fact that, Black people have to look Black? Are we basing it on the fact that Black people are athletic? Are we basing it on the fact that
we all jump high?
Athletic, right? All Black people are muscular, fit, heterosexual, right? So what I would say is, like a lot of what I'm interested in is, reading these media portrayals of Blackness and saying, is this a transformative reading of Blackness, right? Or is this just buying into these essentialist understandings of what it means to be Black? Yeah. And what I've noticed is media is not too good at being anti-essentialist. So I think what I'm most interested in, right, is reading these representations of Blackness and being like, no, like not all Black people look like this. Not all Black people act like this, dress like this. Not all Black people can dunk a basketball, right?
Not all of us sing, not all of us, I think we all have rhythm, though. I'm not gonna lie. I haven't done a study yet, but I'm just playing. But you're right though. You're right.
My thing for y'all then, well, just the conversation of higher ed, or just education, like what do you do? How do you navigate when you have to work with someone, your people, a person of color that ain't really for us or as a community? How do you navigate that space? Because I've been put in that, and it's hard when you are in a, like we say, oh, people of color and mobilize, but first of all, everybody in hearing from me, and I will call your ass out real quick if you go sideways. So, and that's in love though. That's passion. It's not hostile. I'm just passionate. In the words of Amanda Seals, I'm not hostile. Passionate. And I love everything about that. But I think the thing though is, have you been put in a position, or have you been in that situation before where you're in a space and you know that this person of color, this Black person in particular, is not really for doing this work, and or not for the people, for the cause, for the culture? Like, how do you navigate that?
Effectively? Like,
bitch, it don't have to be effectively at all. You can be like, I cussed that bitch out and that was the end of the story. But other than that, right? But I'm just saying. But I'm just saying, and even for like PV, right? So like the fact that you are third year, you're getting ready to go into, your fourth, and when you cross the line, I'm gonna be somewhere over here taking a drink. But celebrating you. But when we think about it though, like, I just really don't know what to do. Like, we want to keep our jobs, we want to be employed, but we got to work with people that look like us or are supposed to be for us, and they don't give a fuck, right? And so, have you been through that? How do you navigate it? It's the question.
So I'm gonna try to keep it as short as I can, because we don't have that kind of time. Yes, and yes. How do I navigate it? In retrospect, not very well. In the actuality, in the situation, probably like a bull in a china shop. I ultimately become frustrated, right? And I'm trying to get better at this, but my want is to expose, because I feel betrayed. Situations. Not that I need, again, same situation we were talking about with you and your professor. Like, I don't need anybody to covet me. I don't need anybody to do for me.
Yeah.
But if you fail to understand your Blackness in certain situations, and we all know which ones those are, when you're behind closed doors and you have an opportunity to use your privilege, your position, your platform, to push against the oppression of white supremacy, right? Especially if you're in positions in higher education where these students is coming in doe-eyed with their hands open, trying to get some love, and you don't use that, then there's a problem with me, right? Like, I have a genuine issue, and how I have navigated those spaces is that those become the hills that I die on. Those become the times when I don't get to cross those. I'm not going to tuck my moral and ethical code on that one. I got to speak my mind. And ultimately, it's because I've came from situations where I wasn't brave enough in those spaces to say the things that I wanted to say. You walk out of it and you feel dirty, right? As the white folks crack the Black joke because they think that you're Hispanic, right? Or they think that you one of the folks, right? And, let me tell you about this Black guy joke I heard the other day. Like, it's funny. I find myself drawn to say something. Now, maybe that's because I'm at a stage in my life where I'm seeing closer to the end than I was at the beginning. And I feel like if I leave this earth and I don't do what I need to do, then I've failed not only myself, but the people that I have brought into it and the ones around me that have been inspired by what I've done. Like, I just feel like I would go to the grave kind of false on that. But I feel like you have to speak up against it in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Now, to your point, everybody needs a job, right? So it's not like I can come home and tell mama, I told Tom about himself. Too bad he fired me at the same time, but still, I got that off my chest.
Yeah.
So I find other ways to expose them. I find, I use my advantage, which at this point in my age is my intellect.
Yep.
To read situations, read rooms, understand things. I pride myself at times at trying to be smarter than the folks in front of me, not ultimately because I have some ego play, but because that is my form of security and safety. Like, me being a little quicker than the people around me is the reason that I'm not dead or in jail like most of the people I grew up with. So I try to fight in those spaces in some way, shape, or form. Maybe that's my form of activism and advocacy. But I try to find those spaces. if situations warrant, now again, everything is situational, and at the end of the day, I still got to eat, but I think I've been pretty okay at what I do at this point, right? And part of it is, me getting this education, I assume just like you all, right, is because I want to continue to expose that. Because I don't think that we're doing ourselves any justice by letting white folks see a different side of things. When you see Black people that step to the side and ultimately play the Uncle Tom with Sambo, then it just continues to solidify what they already feel about us, and I just can't be a part of that. I got little folks that I know if I didn't lay the tracks right, then the other ones are going to walk into those spaces.
That's real. No, that's real.
Yeah. For me, I really feel like I've kind of been lucky as far as my time in academia. Going through master's school, the people who have had the Black people who have had the most influence on me, I've all actually had some positive experiences. Dr. Christopher Brown was my advisor in master's school, and I never had a negative experience like I have in the past, right? My current advisor, Dr. Myra Washington, she's one of the most influential people in my entire life. Talk about tough love. It's constant tough love. But I've had all positive experiences, right? And in the department I'm currently in, it's tons and tons of faculty of color, right? And I don't feel like I've had any bad experiences. But what I will say, based on just the past, and I know we're kind of running out of time here, so I'm just gonna kind of say
fine. You are good.
It hits different when it comes from Black people, right? So I've had the experiences of white people being like, you're not Black, and at some point it's just like, this is just like, it's
because they're the litmus test.
Whatever.
You want me to say something Black? Go ahead.
Yeah.
How about to beat your ass?
Say something else. Say something.
But when it's said by another Black person who you feel like you should be able to trust, it hits different. And I just think it's important. These conversations are important, right? And reading about this stuff is important. Learning about this stuff is important. I had last NCA I was at. I had the respondent on my paper panel asked a question to the entire group and all the presenters, and she was like, so I want you to talk about how you feel like your positionality impacted this research or doing this research. And she goes, but I only want to hear from the white folks. And immediately my heart dropped. I was like, oh, because this was the respondent was Black, so I was like, oh, here we go again. So one by one down the line, this person talks, and she's like pointing at the next person to talk. And as it gets to me, I'm just like, I'm dying inside. She skipped me. And I was like, oh, that was the biggest relief to me. And I actually had to thank her afterwards. I was like, look, like, I want to just thank you for like recognizing that I'm Black. But I would enjoy getting to a point where that's not a thing anymore, right? Mm-hmm. I feel included, that we're not trying to, that we're, I don't want to say more educated, but more willing to accept that there's different types of Blackness, right? So that's what I'll say on behalf of your question. Yeah.
No, I think it's cool. I mean, Charlie already know, so he know my experience. And so I've learned, I had to learn, like, I just had to learn so much by going through fucking trauma. And that is the thing that is always the most frustrating. And so it's like, I got to go through trauma with white folks, but like, here we, and then I'm over here, and then now I got to deal with this. And so I've learned for me that I need to trust my gut, and I just need to trust my gut. And I feel like every person of color has, and I'm just saying for us, we, from my experience, we have this sixth sense, this feeling that we get when we interact with people, and we just know. Like when me and Charlie met, we thought we was fucking separated at birth. Like it's that thing that
It was easy. It was easy.
it
Yeah.
was like
It was
this
easy.
smooth, like like some some whiskey, like it's smooth. And then I just had to learn how to really trust my gut, period. And I mean, I'm sure I've been seen as confrontational, radical, um, all
Because you
of those
stand up for
things.
yourself.
I stand up for myself. I stand up for my people. I stand up against white supremacy, institutionalized racism, and then sometimes I
In
say
all its
things to
forms.
people, and people don't sometimes want to hear the truth. And I think what's interesting to me is that I realize there's so many people of color that are willing to still uphold white supremacy in higher education and institutionalized racism just to save their jobs. And that for me is like, I cannot do that. Too many,
Yeah.
too many fucking people, our ancestors died, right? Like I don't feel comfortable not continuing that work. And so, I know we're a little bit over, but for the people, what would be some final advice of people who are going through struggling with interacting with people of color, either in their departments, areas, that they feel are not supportive of, the culture, people of color? I mean, what advice would you give to them as we close out?
Surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah.
Don't have time for the negativity. Right? For every person who's unaccepting, there's going to be people like Q, right? That that care, right? So for me, it would just be take the time to surround yourself with the right people.
Thank you.
I think if I was going to give anybody some advice, I would tell you to learn, be aware, pay attention. If you are having troubles connecting to folks who look like you, look at your surroundings. Find out if the place that you're in is the place that you need to be. If you have options, and if you don't, find ways to secure yourself. Much like PV said, surround yourself with a blanket of love and security. Find somebody, at least one person that you can, be your genuine and authentic self with when the organization around you calls the code switch every other damn day. And be okay knowing that this is like you are not wrong, right? You're not wrong. You are not an imposter, and you belong wherever you are at, regardless of how other folks may make you feel.
Thank you. I would close this out. For me, echoing all of that which was just said, but I would like to close out by saying that for institutions, white folks in leadership that want to do DEI work, please know that people of color not only have to deal with races and crazy white folks in higher education just as people of color, but we also have to deal with the people of color that really that's not really for us too. So our struggles in higher ed and just in life is very difficult. But me, my advice is always to your sanity and health and your character is more important than anything. And so we can never get another you. you know, if you're underground, 6 feet under because of this, but you can always find another job. And I'm gonna just leave it on that. But today it was great sitting here with my fam, being here on Her Outsider here at South Puget Sound Community College. I'm your host Q, and we out this piece. Yeah, Tip. Actually do the work. I'll let y'all next week.